Good evening, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the importance of creating a collection policy, as well as the role of self-censorship in creating that policy, as well as our collection within the library. So, some important reasons for making a collection policy in the first place are to streamline your material selection, to effectively plan materials, and then to increase involvement with the public. Most of these ideas I got from the IFLA in order to best streamline the process of creating a collection. Policies are always helpful to have, mostly to protect yourself and your library, but also to make the process of adding or removing things from your library pretty set in stone and pretty protected. So to streamline material selection, it's best to set a standard for all books selected and ensure that all library staff are on the same page about what type of materials should be chosen for the library. This can also help eliminate personal bias, and what we're going to talk about in a little bit is the fear of conflict when choosing books for your library. And so having a standard for what type of books are allowed in and what are not is very helpful to kind of decrease that conflict and controversy. It's also helpful to plan your materials. So understanding that we have a lot of fiction, and so maybe it's time to get some autobiographies, or maybe we have a lot of autobiographies about old men, but we don't really have a lot about young women. So types of things like that. So make sure that our library is having lots of different resources and types of materials, as well as how recent are things for our makerspace. Do we have enough activities? Are there things that the kids are really into right now that maybe we don't have a lot of? So things like that to help make sure that allocation of resources is given to a variety of items can be helped with planning. And then also stating the objectives and purpose of a library, as well as what collections we house, can encourage patrons to visit the library. And it can also help guide the staff and the main librarian to ensure that everybody's on the same page for the direction of the library. A lot of the times, patrons don't realize what all is offered in a library, so making that public could be super helpful in encouraging them to come. So the article I chose to talk about regarding self-censorship is called Silence in the Stacks, an exploration of self-censorship in high school libraries. And this article is really interesting because it pulls from a variety of sources, as well as studies and different literature. But one of the conclusions that this study came to was not so much that self-censorship occurs because librarians are inputting their own beliefs into their selections. They're holding themselves back for fear of criticism or for fear of conflict or controversy coming down upon their school or their library because of how often books are banned or challenged or things like that. So the importance of recognizing self-censorship is, yes, of course, to notice when our own opinions and our own bias are coming into our books and what we want to have in our library and not. Oftentimes, there's a lot of autonomy in creating your own library for a school, especially if you're for a smaller school or a less populated district, or if you're the head librarian. You can pretty easily choose, these are the types of things I want, these are the things I don't want. And so we have to be kind of careful not to just pick things that we want, but things that will be most beneficial for our students. But because of all the challenges that have been going on in the past few years, well, for forever, honestly, within libraries of banned books and challenges and things like that, librarians are a lot of the time scared to choose certain books that may be considered diverse or controversial because they don't want to bring that down upon themselves and don't want to have to deal with the conflict. So these are some facts that I found that were interesting from the article about self-censorship. So according to the 2016 School Library Journal, they surveyed 574 American school librarians. Over 90% of elementary and middle school librarians and 73% of high school librarians decided against purchasing a book identified as potentially controversial because they probably did not want to deal with the backlash or the fighting that they would have to do. And can't say I blame them as a teacher now. Even the comments and fighting I get with parents, let alone a school board, would be very intimidating to deal with as a librarian. But Tudor and et al. Also notes that librarians refusing to purchase materials or removing materials after purchase for fear of a challenge denies their students opportunities to expand their worldview and then build empathy. So, one of the ways that we can combat this is to empower librarians to select all types of literature for their libraries to ensure that patrons have access to a wide variety of information and perspectives. It's not just about one view. But if librarians have the support that they need to be able to choose the books that they think would best benefit their students, whether or not they're considered controversial, and controversial is not the same as appropriate, but it's not the point of this talk, so I won't get into that. But if they're afraid of that conflict, of that conversation, they're doing a disservice to their students. But I also understand it. So maybe if we protect our librarians better and our teachers better, they would be more willing to stand up for our students' rights to information. So, also, according to Kyle, and regarding the article about what makes a good children's book and how to select good children's books, there is a difference between books that are meant purely for entertainment, especially those that are from the screen to the book versus instead of vice versa, and that does have an effect on the quality of the book. But sometimes people think that you have to choose between the bright colored, happy children's book versus one that's heavily based in text to make it more lofty or intellectual. And that's not always the case. Believable characters, a clear plot, and theme, as well as a strong narration, all work together to create a quality book. So, some collection development insights I got from Kyle's article is that books are enticing for children because of their plot. I think I've always thought this, but the narrative of a story is its soul. And so when Kyle was talking about how those Disney character books that are pulled from a movie and then recreated into a book are often clunky, and the narration is not very well done, and it doesn't feel very natural and flowy. It feels very forced. It's because they don't have that strong narration and that strong narrative. And so the book is really hard. It's really hard then to consider that book high quality, no matter how entertaining and cute it is. So this concept also put into my mind, like why we always consider the book is better than the movie, is because of the imagination and the creativity that it can put into our brains when we're reading words versus being forced to see it one specific way. And so books without strong characters, settings, themes, and plots and narratives don't capture our hearts or our minds, as well as books that have those things do. And children are fully capable of recognizing that. Even if they don't recognize it in as grand a capacity, they know when a book is entertaining, when it is captivating, when it is more than just bright colors and pictures, especially as they start to get into upper elementary school. They want stories that matter. They want to be exposed to the big kid stuff. They want to think deeper for themselves. So I think that's important too as you're looking at the development throughout elementary school. And here are my references, and thank you so much for listening. Have a great night.